Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure it is to be here with you in Oslo today, in a country with such close and long-standing ties to Scotland. Every year, the Christmas tree that stands in the centre of our capital city, Edinburgh, is donated by the region of Hordaland and serves as a real reminder of the cooperation between Scots and Norwegians during the war, when Scottish Islands were a safe landing point for Norwegians fighting occupation. The ties between our nations go back many centuries, even before that, though, something that is especially obvious in Scottish Islands and the Hebrides, Orkney and Shetland. But those links are also evident here in Norway. The great composer Edvard Grieg had a Scottish great-grandfather, and just across Oslo Harbour, the Fram was built by Colin Archer, who came from a family of boat builders in the Scottish city of Dundee. The flow of culture, commerce and people across the North Sea has undoubtedly benefited both of our countries, and it continues to this very day. Today, Norway is Scotland's sixth most important trading partner. More than 100 Norwegian businesses are based in Scotland. Hundreds of students from Norway study at our universities every year. Our higher research institutions cooperate on areas ranging from aquaculture to energy. And as I will go on to say, I believe that Scotland and Norway have a major role to play in leading the move towards a carbon-neutral economy. So it is a great pleasure to be here to reaffirm the importance to Scotland of our friendship with Norway. However, as you might expect, that pleasure is somewhat tinged with regret. I am speaking to you today at just 23 days before Scotland will leave the European Union, despite the fact that more than 60% of people in Scotland voted to remain in the European Union. And that strong support for remaining in the EU has been confirmed in subsequent elections in Scotland, most recently in the UK general election, which took place in December. And of course, we're not simply being taken out of the EU, we're also being removed from the single market and from the customs union. Back in 2016, shortly after the Brexit referendum, the Scottish Government that I lead argued for a compromise form of Brexit, which would have seen Scotland and the UK remain within the single market and the customs union. That option, which would have had some similarities to Norway's position within the EEA, seemed like the obvious compromise solution, given that two of the countries that comprise the United Kingdom, Scotland and Northern Ireland, had voted to remain, and of course 48% of people across the whole of the UK did so too. Those proposals, unfortunately, were rejected. The UK intends instead to negotiate a hard form of Brexit, which will result potentially in a more distant relationship with the EU than the one Norway currently enjoys. That would enable the UK to move away from EU standards in areas like workers' rights and environmental protections. It would deprive people in Scotland of the freedom we currently enjoy to study, live, work in the single market, and also limit our ability to attract people from Europe to live and study in Scotland, something that could see Scotland's working age population decline in years to come. And it is worth stressing that last point at a time when immigration is a controversial topic in many countries. People who have moved to Scotland don't just benefit our economy and public services, they enrich our country and our society in many ways. And I don't believe that any Scottish Parliament would choose to end freedom of movement, and yet that is what we face. That's not a future Scotland voted for. It's not a future that the Scottish Government wants. It's not the future that was contemplated when we considered the issue of independence in 2014. Back then, those who were opposed to Scotland being independent said that voting to stay in the United Kingdom was the only way to ensure our membership of the European Union. and told us that the UK was a partnership of equals. But it is becoming increasingly clear that it is through Scotland becoming independent that we can achieve a true partnership, both with our friends in the rest of the UK, our closest friends, and with other European countries. That partnership, from Scotland's perspective, will also be based on values, a belief in human dignity, democracy, equality, respect for human rights and the rule of law. And that's why the Scottish Government wants to offer the people of Scotland the choice of that future. Now, of course, it's not possible with certainty to predict what the future holds. But I am confident, since all of the evidence of the last few years points this way, that Scotland will always want to remain an open and an outward-looking country. Certainly, our vision of an independent Scotland is not about breaking away, but instead about reaching out and joining in. In fact, perhaps one of the best advertisements for independence is seeing how other small northern European nations have been able to use their powers not simply to improve the lives of their citizens at home, but to play a constructive part on the world stage. Norway is, of course, in my opinion, a shining example of that. From your promotion of peace initiatives to your leadership in human rights, equality, ethical investment and international development. In Scotland, we seek to do what we can to increase our role in the world stage, from increasing our presence in Brussels, notwithstanding Brexit, and opening new bases in Paris, Berlin, Dublin, London and Ottawa. We're developing stronger links also with our Nordic neighbours. Scottish Development International opened a base in Stavanger in 2012, and the Scottish Government has played an increasing role in events like the Arctic Circle Assembly and the Tromsø Arctic Frontiers Conference. We recently published an Arctic policy framework covering areas for cooperation such as higher education, culture and climate change. In many ways, all of that activity confirms the main message of my remarks this morning. Scotland and Norway are natural partners. We don't simply share ties of history and geography, we also share common interests and common values. That will remain true regardless of Brexit, I hope, and whatever Scotland's future constitutional position. So it follows that the Scottish Government is determined to work with the Norwegian Government and Norwegian business to strengthen those relationships. That is true in areas where we have well-established links, from food and drink to sustainable tourism. However, we're also building new partnerships in areas such as digital health. And perhaps the single most obvious area where we can benefit from working together is in the transition to a low-carbon economy. Both Scotland and Norway understand the importance and the urgency of moving to a net zero emissions future. In Scotland, we've set a statutory target to become a net zero nation by 2045, with a 75% reduction in emissions by 2030. Norway, I know, also has ambitious targets and has set very clear aims in sectors such as domestic shipping. Both of our countries are committed to a just transition, one where economic and technological change benefits everyone in our societies. And of course, Scotland and Norway are also countries which have benefited and continue to benefit from our oil and gas sectors. We now need to make a transition to a low carbon and then a net zero age. In doing so, existing energy companies must play their full part. Last year, I had the privilege of opening Equinor's High Wind Scotland project, which is off Peterhead on the northeast coast of Scotland. That's the first floating wind farm anywhere in the world, produces enough power for 20,000 homes, and is pioneering a technology which will be vital in enabling offshore wind to be cost-effective in deep waters. As offshore wind continues to expand in Scotland, we are supporting companies in our supply chain, many of which have huge experience in the offshore oil and gas sector, to develop their capabilities in this area. Cooperation between Norwegian and Scottish companies will be increasingly important as more projects are built and maintained. And there will also be opportunities for wave and tidal energy projects, technologies where Scotland is already recognised as an international. Of course, as we generate more electricity in the North Sea, we need to make sure that our transmission network can deal with that. That's why the Scottish Government is a strong supporter of the North Connect project, which would lay a 600-kilometre cable between Scotland and Norway. That would enable surplus electricity from Scottish wind farms to be transferred to Norway and Scandinavia. And on days where the wind doesn't blow, which doesn't feel like it's often in Scotland at the moment, it would enable electricity from Norway's hydroelectric schemes to meet some of Scotland's electricity needs. Regulators in both Norway and Britain have highlighted the scheme's potential benefits. It would help both Scotland and Norway to reduce our carbon emissions while increasing our energy security, and I very much hope that we see it go ahead. The final area I want to highlight where we should work together is carbon capture, utilisation and storage. Scotland, because of our depleted gas fields in the central North Sea, has the potential to store far more carbon dioxide than we emit. We also have an energy supply chain which is well equipped to develop carbon capture technology. That's why there's now an industry-led partnership promoting carbon capture and storage in the northeast of Scotland. I know that Norway has plans to capture carbon dioxide from industries such as cement and manufacturing before storing the CO2 beneath the North Sea. These are among the most ambitious proposals of their kind anywhere in the world. They relate to a technology which will be essential as the world strives to reach a net zero future. Norway and Scotland can both be pioneers in a key technology for tackling climate change. And there's also a historic analogy here from the early 20th century. The British aluminium company used the hydropower expertise it had developed in Scotland to power the first Norwegian aluminium smelter. That played a part in the development of Norway's hydroelectric power industry. Norway's experiences were in turn influential in the formation of the North of Scotland Hydroelectricity Board in 1943, something which brought tremendous benefits to the Scottish Highlands. So during the 20th century, we learned from each other to our mutual benefit in developing hydropower. Cooperation between our two countries now can help to develop new technologies in areas such as carbon capture and offshore wind, and that would be good certainly for Scotland and for Norway, but we can help the world in doing that too. And that's why, although I began this speech on a pessimistic note by talking about my least favourite subject, which is Brexit, I want to end it in a much more upbeat manner. In November of this year, Glasgow, my home city, will host COP26, the most important climate change conference since the Paris summit 5 years ago. The conference will, of course, not be without challenges, as the recent Madrid talks showed, but I am very hopeful that we can achieve real progress. And I'm determined that when people come to November's summit, they will see that Scotland and Glasgow, which in so many ways led the world into the industrial age, are doing everything we can to lead the world into the net zero age. No country, and certainly no small country, can tackle climate change by itself. All countries need to work together. And that's one of the many reasons why I see Brexit as such a mistake. But all countries have the ability, and indeed I would argue the obligation, to lead by example. That's what Scotland is determined to do, and I know that Norway shares that ambition and that determination. And I strongly believe that in so many areas, if we work even more closely together, we will bring real benefits to our businesses, to our people, and for the planet that we all inhabit as a whole. I think that's something well worth working towards, even in these challenging times, especially in these challenging times that we live in. So I am absolutely delighted to be here with you today. I want to thank you for the invitation and to thank you for the hospitality. I hope the rest of this very impressive conference is productive, and I look forward very much to many more years of close partnership between Scotland and Norway. Thank you very much indeed.